Hey guys, it's Barbara and welcome back to my channel. Today I am so excited to share 25 of my previous Christmas DIYs all compiled into one video. I hope you get tons of inspiration and you truly enjoy today's video. And if you haven't done so already, I would love you to click that subscribe button and visit me on my other social media accounts. The links are in the description box. Enjoy, you guys. I'm going to remove the 3 signs from the yardstick, and I'm just going to be using those 3 signs. And to help with the process, I used my hairdryer to loosen up the glue so that I would not damage these pieces too much as I remove them, because once you assemble this piece together, you will be able to see the back part of these signs. I am also using this nice thick MDF sign from Dollar General for $2, and I'm going to go ahead and again use my hairdryer to loosen that glue up so that I can remove these stickers from the back. Then I'm going to take some 100 grit sandpaper, and you can get a package of different grit sandpaper from Dollar Tree. I'm using 100 grit so that I can get in between all the lettering because I had some rough edges and I wanted to have a nice smooth finish. And to get all of that excess glitter off of this sign, I used my hairdryer again to loosen up that glue so that I can easily sand all of the glitter down so it would be nice and smooth. Then I'm going to take my Waverly chalk paint in the color ink, and I'm going to paint this entire sign except for the front of it. I do take my time and get in between all of the lettering. This is a little bit time consuming, but I thoroughly enjoy painting. I find it to be very relaxing. This only takes 1 coat and you get really good coverage on there. So this is how it looks once the paint has dried, and I tried to make sure that I did not get very much paint on the front of the sign, because I'm going to be painting the S, the N, and the W in my Waverly chalk paint in white. I'm not going to paint the snowflake because I'm going to do something a little different with the snowflake. So this does take 2 coats of the white paint, and if you get a little bit of dripping or if it gets on the outside, just wipe the excess off, let that dry, and then you can go back over the spots that the paint got onto with a black marker. I painted all 3 of the signs with 2 coats of the Waverly chalk paint in white, and I did go ahead and get the front and the back. I think these are going to make the perfect snowman because I love the design at the top and the bottom. I also will be using 3 of the tumbling tower game pieces that you can purchase from Dollar Tree, and I give those 1 coat of paint in the Waverly chalk paint in the color white as well. And this is how these signs look once the 2 coats have dried. So those have some really good coverage from the chalk paint. So for the snow sign, to cover up the snowflake, I am using a piece of buffalo check scrapbook paper from Hobby Lobby. And I just line it up where I want the design to be on the snowflake, and then I flip the sign over and use my pencil to trace around the snowflake. Trying to make sure that I get in between all of the grooves because there are a lot of little pieces on there. Now you do want to leave some excess on each of the sides where the letter N and the letter W are so that you can create the snowflake design to go over top of that. So I just saved a piece of what I already cut out to hold that over top of those places so that I could trace that out and have the same design on the N and the W. And then once I trace that out, again, I'll just cut that down with my scissors. Then I took my pencil and I wanted the S to stand out more than just blending in with the N. So I just drew the outline of the S, and then I will go over where I put my pencil marks with an oil-based black Sharpie. And then I do go ahead and go a little bit down on the N and the W just in case you could see that once I put the scrapbook paper on there. Then to apply the scrapbook paper, I'm going to be using some matte Mod Podge. And I put a nice even coat on top of the sign, and then place the paper on there and make sure there's no wrinkles or creases. And then I'll put a nice even coat on top of my scrapbook paper to seal that in. Now I let mine dry for several hours before I get any of the excess paper off. And because there's a lot of grooves and different shapes on the snowflake, and there are very small spaces, I am using a fingernail file to get in between all of those grooves. Now, I just use my fingernail file going in one direction. Try to be careful not to rip or tear any of the scrapbook paper. And I'll go all the way around the snowflake until I get a nice smooth finish. I'm using 3 of these wooden snowflake stickers from Dollar Tree, and I removed the foam sticker portion off of the back, and I accidentally broke one. So I thought, well, I'll just glue this back together when I put it together, but it actually worked out in my favor. Everything happens for a reason, and I'll show you what I mean in just a little while when I put these snowflakes on there. It was such a blessing that it broke. So I painted each one of the snowflakes just on the front and in between all the little grooves with the Waverly white chalk paint, and this only took 1 coat. And then once I get all of those painted, excuse me, I'm going to set those to the side to dry. And then I am using some quart paint stir sticks. You can get these from Lowe's in a package of 30 for $1. I cut the rounded tip off, and then I'm going to hold this up to my sign to see how long I want this piece to be, because this is going to be the rim of the hat. So I go ahead and do this for each one of the signs and cut 3 of the craft sticks down. Then this is completely optional, but I didn't want mine to have such pointy, sharp edges, so I took some sandpaper and just rounded those corners off. Then I'm going to take the craft sticks and lay them on top of the sign to determine where I want the hat rim to be. And then I'll take my pencil and draw above those craft sticks so that when I get ready to paint, I will know not to paint below those lines. So I'm going to paint the tops of the signs and these craft sticks with my Waverly chalk paint and ink. And I am going to paint the front and the back of these signs because, again, you will be able to see the back of the sign once it's all put together. And I just try to keep the angle the same on the back as what I have on the front. And as you see me taking this off camera, it's because I'm using my hair dryer to dry it so that when I put it back on the table, I don't smear or smudge that paint. And if I use my hair dryer on the table, then the craft sticks will blow away. So I'm going to paint the tops of these signs for the hats, and then I'm going to paint each one of the craft sticks completely on the front side, and then the back side, just the 2 outside edges, because you will be able to see parts of that once you apply this to the sign. So I just free-handed the faces on the snowman. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, you can always print out an image and trace it or transfer it on there. I'm using an ultrafine Sharpie marker and my oil-based Sharpie marker. And I'm also going to be using some Folk Art Pure Orange acrylic paint for the nose. So I initially went with the ultrafine to go on the outline of all of the pieces of their face, and then I filled in the eyes with the oil base, but I like the thickness of the oil base and I thought that it would make it stand out more. So after I paint the nose, I do go back over the eyebrows and the mouth with the oil-based Sharpie I just think it gave it more of a pop. And then once the paint dries on the nose, I go around the outline of the nose with the fine tip, and then I draw a couple of lines on each one of the noses just to make it look like more of a realistic carrot. And then once I'm finished with that, I'm going to attach the rims of the hats with hot glue. And I'm going to do that for all 3 pieces. And then I'm going to attach the snowflakes to the top of the hat. And this is how the snowflake breaking worked in my favor, because the smaller snowman's top of his hat would not have held the full snowflake. It would have stood off the top of the hat, so it worked out absolutely perfect. Then I'm going to take the 3 tumbling tower pieces and I am going to glue these to the back of the snow sign. And I just make sure that I line it up so that you won't be able to see the tumbling tower pieces from the front of the sign. So as I'm holding it up, I'm just determining where I want each of the snowmen to be and making sure that you can't see those tower pieces from the front. Now I go ahead and hold the snowman up because the bottom edges are not straight, and then I hold the sign up so I can make sure that as I'm putting them together, they're straight and that it will be able to stand freely. I go ahead and attach the two outside snowmen first so that when I get ready to put the one in the center, I can leave an equal amount of space on each side of the snowman so it would look a little bit more cohesive. And I absolutely love how this project turned out. I think this is so cute, so adorable. I really enjoyed making it, and I hope you enjoy it too. Let me know in the comments down below if you liked project number 1. For project number 2, I am using these wood craft cubes from Dollar Tree. They come in the Crafter Square section, and they come 36 in a pack. I am also using some Gorilla Wood glue and some hot glue. So I've gone ahead and set out 4 rows of 9 cubes, and I am going to put some wood glue on there and then put some hot glue, and then I'll hold 2 of the cubes together, pressing very tightly, making sure that I keep it straight and as tight as possible. And I'm going to do that for all 9 of these cubes to create one long piece. And again, just making sure that you're pressing as firm as you can and keep it as straight as you can. Now, the Gorilla Wood glue is going to give that more of a permanent hold, and the hot glue is just going to hold it together until the Gorilla Wood glue sets up. So now that I have 4 of those separate sections, and the glue has dried, I'm going to use some 80 grit sandpaper, and I just sanded off all of the excess glue so that I'd have a nice smooth finish. I'm using 2 of these signs from Dollar Tree, and I've gone ahead and removed the metal hangers from the back of both of these signs. And then I'm going to use my hair dryer, or if you have a heat tool, to loosen the glue up so that I can remove the stickers as well as the pieces from the inside of the sign. And I do have to use a screwdriver to get that little block off of there. I've gone ahead and sanded down those pieces as well as the stickers on the back. And then I'm going to use my Waverly chalk paint in white, and I'm going to paint each one of these, I'm going to call them cube sticks, 2 coats of paint in the Waverly chalk paint in white. And then I'm going to paint both of the signs as well, 2 thin coats, allowing that paint to dry in between the coats. And I'm going to paint the outside and the inside of both of these signs. And then I'm going to be using 4 of the Tumbling Tower piece games from Dollar Tree, 1 of the cubes, some Gorilla Wood glue, and my hot glue again. So I'm going to put the wood glue and the hot glue in between 2 of the Tumbling Tower pieces, gluing those 2 together, and then taking the 2 sets that I created and gluing them on top of each other, and then I put the cube in the center on the top. Then I'm using one of these book rings that come in a package from Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to glue that on top of the cube. And then once that glue has set, I'm going to put a ton of glue on top of that to hold that book ring on top of the cube. Then I'm using one of these very thin wood snowflake ornaments from Dollar Tree. And I go ahead and give that 1 coat of paint, and I actually paint the front and the back because you will be able to see both sides and get in between all of those grooves. And then I'm also going to paint what is now going to become like the handle on the top of our decor piece. And that as well takes 2 coats of paint. And then once I have those painted, I'm going to assemble these pieces together once all of the paint has dried on all of these pieces. So I'm going to put my wood glue on the actual cube stick, and then I'm going to put a good amount of hot glue on each sides of those corners and the bottom. And then I'm going to put the cube stick in there, making sure that I press firmly into the corners and making sure that that is straight. And I'm going to do that for all 4 pieces in all 4 corners. And then to attach the top part, the top sign on top of these, I am going to put the wood glue again on the cube pieces, and then I'm going to put the hot glue in the corners of each of the sign, trying to move as fast as I can so that that hot glue doesn't set before I can put it on top of those cube pieces. And you try to make sure that you can keep it as straight as possible and press those corners firmly into the corners at the top part of the sign. Now this could be a lantern or a decorative piece or whatever you like. I'm going to go ahead and attach the handle in the same way. Of course, this handle's for decorative purposes. I wouldn't pick it up by the handle. And I'm just centering that in the top, and then I'm going to attach the snowflake on the back side with just a little bit of hot glue on each side of the snowflake. And then to decorate this, I'm going to be using one of the red sleigh ornaments from Dollar Tree. This is so cute. It already has a really pretty decorative bow and some greenery on there. And I'm also going to be using one of these picks from Dollar Tree. And I just wanted the berries and then the holly leaves. So I just take that apart and then I glue the holly leaves in front of the handle. And then I just pulled the berries apart and separated those out a little bit. And I do glue some of the leaves down just a little bit so they don't stand straight up. And then I'm using one of the flameless candles, again from Dollar Tree. And I'm just going to place that into the sled and then place the sled inside of our decorative piece. And I think this turned out so cute. I love the way you can see the snowflake in the back. It is absolutely adorable. You could put any kind of decorative touch you want inside of there instead of a sleigh. You could put a larger flameless candle. Super cute sign from Dollar Tree with the wooden beads at the top. I'm also using a Christmas ornament from Dollar General, which was $1. And then I am also going to be using a white fern from Dollar Tree that has like some glitter and some powdery stuff on the outside. And I'm going to use my 3 pine cones. These are the frosted pine cones. They come in a package from Dollar General. You get 12 in a pack for $1. And then Waverly chalk paint in the color white. So I'm going to begin by removing the hanger off of the Christmas ornament, and then I'm going to paint just the inside of the sign about 2/3 of the way down. This is probably not necessary because I'm going to decorate it, but just in case you could see between the decorations, I didn't want you to be able to see the wording in the back. I wanted the back to look just like the sides. And I'm going to place the ornament on the bottom front of the sign, and I'm going to put that down with some hot glue and just make sure I have an even amount on each side at the bottom of the sign. And then I have pulled 4 pieces of the white fern off to decorate the top, and I just placed it, kind of played around with it until I got it the way I liked. And I do end up pulling 2 more pieces off because I like the fullness of 2 on each side at the bottom, and then 2 at the top, kind of coming out from the pine cones out to the side. And then I glue the 3 pine cones down right on top of that. And I think this turned out absolutely gorgeous. If you have a very large Christmas tree, you could use this as an ornament. I don't have room for a very large Christmas tree, so I will just be using this as part of my Christmas decor. Centerpiece, and I'm actually going to be using 2 of these wooden crates from Dollar Tree, and then 1 of the wood planks. They come in a pack of 6 in the Crafter Square section at Dollar Tree. Some Gorilla Wood glue, my hot glue gun, and I'm going to just put the Gorilla Glue on one side of one of the trays, and then I'm going to put my hot glue on the other side, and then I'm going to butt these up together to create one long piece so you could use it as a centerpiece. I'm actually going to use it on my console table, my entryway, and I think it's just going to be absolutely gorgeous. So once that sets up, I'm going to take the wood plank and I'm going to attach that in the center of the 2 pieces, and I'm going to put wood glue on like one rim of the tray and then hot glue on the other rim, on the other side of the tray. And then I'm going to hold that in place until that hot glue sets up, and just make sure that I try to center it right there between the two pieces. And then I'm going to give it one coat of paint in my Waverly chalk paint in white. And of course, you could paint this before you put the pieces together, because you obviously can't get inside up under that wood plank. But I'm okay with that because I'm going to decorate it and you're not going to see underneath those wooden plank sides. But it's just your personal preference if you want to paint it before you glue it. This is how it looks once the paint has dried. So pretty. I didn't bother to paint the bottom because you're not going to see it. But you could paint it if you wanted to. To distress it, I'm going to use my Waverly chalk paint in the color Mineral and a nice stiff brush. And I'm not too heavy-handed with it. I just wanted to give it a little something extra to look a little bit more farmhouse, because that is the style in my home. And I just go around each of the edges, and I do go over the top piece, the little wood plank piece at the top. You're not really going to see it, but just in case you could, I just kind of went over that and distressed it a little bit. And then also I'm going to be using this beautiful glass candle holder from Dollar Tree. Now the insert for the votive candle is like a dark brown, and this piece from Dollar Tree was very like the paint was peeling off of it, so I painted it in my black chalkboard paint from Dollar General, and I just give that one coat all the way around. Now I do not recommend using a lighted tea light, like an actual flame, because I don't know how that would react with the chalk paint. I'm going to use one of the flameless tea lights from Dollar Tree. They come 2 in a pack. I just didn't know how a flame, I mean, the way I'm decorating mine anyway, I would not use a flame candle anyway. So I don't know how that would react with chalk paint. But I'm going to use this beautiful pick. These are like the little clips from Dollar Tree, and it has the red berries and the pine cones and a cotton ball, and I'm going to use 4 of those. Now I removed the clips from the bottom of mine. You don't have to, I just chose to do that. And I just fluff each one out and get it nice and full looking, and then arrange it in the tray the way I like it, which is sort of similar on each side, like the top part, the cotton is going outwards, and then the pine cones. But you decorate it however you like, in whichever style you want. And I think that was nice and full. Those 4 clips really filled that up and made it nice and pretty. So I'm using this berry bundle from Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to pull 2 of the berry bundles off, but I am going to pull 4 of the leaves off that are under the berries. And I'm going to cut the plastic portion off that holds the leaf onto the stem and pull that out so it's just the leaf part of it. And it has a nice shiny finish on one side and a dull finish on the back side. And it naturally flips up because of the way it was designed with the center hole. So I'm actually turning mine inside out so that when I put my glass candle holder on there, the shiny part will kind of form up around the glass candle holder. I hope that makes sense, you guys. And you could secure that down with hot glue. I chose not to because I do want to be able to take this tray and redecorate it for different holidays, and I didn't want to glue those leaves on there and make them permanent. So I just took 2 of the berry bundles that I picked off, and then I just formed a circle, kind of bend those around until it forms a half circle, and then I put the top part on the glass votive and inserted the flameless candle, and this turned out so gorgeous. I think this is going to be so beautiful in my entryway on that console table. This plastic drawer organizer tray that came from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to go ahead and remove the label, and then I'm going to paint the outside part and the inside edges of this tray with my Waverly chalk paint in the color white. And I just wanted this to look more like an enamelware piece rather than plastic. This only takes one coat, and then once that has dried on the outside as well as those inside pieces, I'm going to paint the top rim with my Waverly chalk paint in the color ink. This has a little bit of a lip on the outside of the tray, so not only do I paint the top rim, but I paint the outside of that lip. And I think this looks like a really beautiful enamelware piece. I'm also using this wood Merry and Bright sign from Dollar Tree and 2 of the 6-inch wood dowels. These also come from Dollar Tree. And I'm going to attach 2 of the dowels to the back of the sign with hot glue. And I just make sure that I keep close to the same amount of distance off of the outside edge of the sign when I place each one of my dowels on there. Once the glue sets up, I'm going to paint this sign with my Waverly chalk paint and ink. And I do paint the front and the back of the sign as well as both of the dowels, because when you put this piece together, you will be able to see the back of the sign as well. This only takes one coat. You get really good coverage because that's a pretty light colored wood, and the ink colored paint really does give you nice coverage. So once this is dried, it's so pretty already. I just love how that turned out. I am going to use some Christmas picks from Dollar Tree. And I'm also going to use some leftover pine cones and greenery that I used on a previous DIY. These were just some leftover pieces. And I wanted to cover up that glitter mostly on those pine cones. So I used Waverly chalk paint in white, and I painted like the outside edges of the pine cones, which gave it a nice snowy effect. And I went ahead and painted some of the greenery as well to give it a snowy effect. And I'm also going to use some of the garland ties. I found mine at Dollar Tree, but if you can't find the garland ties, you can also find those at Dollar General. And I think they come, I'm not sure, but it may be like 15 in a pack. So I'm going to use 7 of them. I started off with 3 of them, and then I'm going to take 4 more and fold those in half. And then I do give each one of these a dusting of the white chalk paint to make those look snowy as well. So I folded these in half because I'm going to use the garland ties as filler when I put all of my pieces together in my tray. So once you, of course, want to make sure all that paint has dried before you start decorating your tray. I went ahead and cut down some styrofoam pieces. This came from a block at Dollar Tree. So I just cut those down so that I can place those in the tray so I can put my sign and my greenery in there. So I held the sign up to make sure that my styrofoam blocks would line up so that I could put the dowels inside those styrofoam blocks. And then I just fill in the rest with the other pieces that I have cut. So I go ahead and just push the sign down in there, and then I take some hot glue and go around the dowels, thinking that it was going to be sturdy, but it wasn't as sturdy as I wanted it to be. So I took 4 of the wood cubes that you can buy in a package from Dollar Tree, and then I'm going to take 1 and place it on each of the back of the dowels, and then 1 on each of the front side of the dowel. And then this gave it more stability and made it more sturdy so that the sign would stand up freely and not tilt and wobble over. Then I took my garland ties and just put 1 on each side, and then I'm going to take the pieces that I folded and I'll hot glue those down and wrap those around the dowels, 1 on each side, and then I'll take the other 2 and put those in the middle, and this is going to cover up a lot of the styrofoam pieces. And then once I get those pieces in the middle, I'm going to take my picks and I'm going to pull those apart so that I can put part of the pick around the dowel so it'll look full on both sides of the sign. And then I wanted to make sure that I had the pine cones in the front so that you would be able to see those as well as those beautiful red Christmas balls. So I'm just going to wrap those around, and I don't hot glue these down because they sit very nicely in there. And then once I get those in place, I'm going to take the other two pine cones and the greenery that I have already painted and just place those in the back. So I'll have some pine cones in the front and some in the back. And then the last garland tie, I'm going to cut that into 4 pieces so that I can use those pieces to fill in where you may be able to see some of the styrofoam. Just in a few little places there, you may be able to see some of the styrofoam. So I'll cover that up. And then I'll also take the pine cone that's in the front that's sort of dangling down. I'm going to glue that to the pick stems to cover where the stems meet each other, and it'll have a nice finished look. So I put a generous amount of glue on there so it will stay on those stems. And I absolutely love how this turned out. I think it is so gorgeous. Christmas ornament from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to go ahead and remove the hanger as well as the sign from the bottom, and I go ahead and take the tree off as well. Now save the tree because we're going to reattach that to the truck, but I want to paint the truck first. And of course, in order to paint the truck, I've got to get all this glitter off. And I found the easiest way to remove all of this glitter is to heat it up a little bit with my hairdryer to loosen that glue up. And then I could take my sandpaper, and I'm using 100 grit sandpaper, and it just sands very easily off of there. So I get most of the glitter off. You can't get all of it off because it's kind of down in all those crevices, but for the most part, I get the majority of the glitter off. Now I'm going to paint this with my Folk Art Christmas Red acrylic paint, and you may be wondering, why are you painting it red when it's already red? But this is the Christmas red is a little bit of a different color, and it matched the stickers I'm going to use for this project a lot better than the original color that the truck was. So once that paint has dried, I am using my silver metallic paint marker, and this came from Dollar General, to draw in my wheelbases. And as I'm doing that, I realized I did not fill in the holes where the sign was hanging from the bottom. So I just used some spackling to fill those in, and then I'm going to wipe the excess off and then let that dry before I paint the wheels. So I just used a baby wipe to wipe that excess off. Then I took my black oil-based Sharpie and went around some of the edging to give it a little bit more of a rustic type look, and then draw my wheelbases in and colored those in, and then I drew the lines for the door. And then I'm going to take my silver metallic marker again, and I'm going to color in like in the back to make it look like that's where the bumper is, and give the door a handle, and then the front where the lights are. And then I didn't like the door was a little bit too dark, so I do go back in with my Christmas red and just touch that up just a little bit. Then I pulled the berries off of the Christmas tree because I really didn't want those on there. So once I get those off, and then I had to pull all that extra hot glue that was on there off, I'm going to paint my sign that I'm going to put my truck in with my Waverly chalk paint in white. And this is one of those shadow box signs. So I just remove the outside frame and the glass, and then I'm going to give that 2 coats of paint on the inside of the sign. And this is just like a cardboard. So once I get those in there, and I do just put 2 thin coats, letting it dry in between. And then, because it took 2 coats just to cover that green up and then the design that was already in there. So now I am just going to hot glue the tree back into the truck. And I'm only gluing it right there at the bottom. I'm not going to glue it at the top because I'm going to add a little bit more to this truck. I'm using 3 of the wood cubes, and then I'm going to use some of this beautiful red ribbon with the white snowflakes on there. And I thought these would make cute Christmas presents. So I just hot glued the ribbon around the cube, and then I'll cut one piece to put on top of the cube, but I don't put any on the bottom because that side is going to be glued down. So I made 2 of the same kind with the red ribbon and the white snowflakes, and then I'm going to wrap one with this cute candy cane ribbon using the same process, hot gluing it down and then cutting a piece to put on top of the cube. Then I'm going to take one of the tumbling tower pieces from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to glue that to the back of the truck because I wanted it to stand off of the frame a little bit more than just being flat on there. Now I'm not going to hot glue that to the frame just yet, the back of the sign. I'm just going to hold it up there because I'm going to put some of these wall stickers. This came from Dollar General, and I wanted to use the Merry and Bright, and I thought that, you know, this red matches really, really well with the stickers. The Christmas red matched those really, really well. So I'm just going to put that at the top, and then I'm going to hot glue my truck down, and then I'm going to hot glue my presents around the tree that's in the truck. I also glue the tree down just to make sure that it stayed to the back of the sign rather than popping up so much. And then I'm going to use some of this sparkling faux snow from Dollar Tree. And I'm just going to I just wanted enough that it would show under the truck and a little bit on the truck so it looked like the truck was going through snow. And then I found that the easiest way to keep that from all falling out is to put the glass and the frame on top of it and try to line it up a little bit. And then you can quickly flip that over and then snap the back into place without all that snow going everywhere. Now it's fine just the way it is once you pop it in, but just for added protection, I put a little bit of tape on each side because I didn't want it to come loose and that snow go everywhere. And this project is finished, and I think it is so adorable. I just love how this sign turned out. Scrap wood that I had in a pile in my shop, and I'm going to go ahead and cut that down to 25 inches long and 16 inches high. And then I'm going to take my orbital sander and sand down all those rough edges to make it nice and smooth. Now I know that not everyone has access to wood or they don't feel comfortable with power tools, so you could certainly use some foam board for this project if you are not comfortable with power tools or if you just don't have any scrap wood. I debated on whether or not I wanted to stain it or paint it, but this has been sitting out of my shop for a while, so it was kind of discolored. So I decided to go ahead and paint this with my Krylon chalky finished paint, and I will leave a link to that in my description box below if you are interested. And I painted the outside edges and gave the front of the sign 2 coats, of course allowing it to dry in between. And then I wanted to distress it some more, so I'm going to use my Decor chalky paint. This is gray color, and I will have a link to that in my description box below if you are interested as well. And then a nice stiff bristled type of brush, and then I'm going to heavily distress that. I'm pretty much emphasizing on where the wood grain is, those little knots that were on there. And then I'm going to let that dry, and I'm going to be using one of the wall stickers from Walmart for $2.98. You guys, I was so excited when I saw this. So I picked this up, and then I'm just going to lay it out on my side to decide where I want to put it. And I want mine to stay on there permanently. I don't want it to come back off, so I'm going to use some Mod Podge to put that down. So I found it easier to just lay the truck out where I wanted it, and then I'll fold each side up and apply my Mod Podge underneath. So this is me just trying to make sure that it's straight and it's not crooked and wonky. And then, of course, it has all these creases where it was packaged. So I tried to use my Cricut scraper, and then I thought I was going to ruin the sticker. So I just found it was easier to use my hand and then put extra Mod Podge where those pieces were folded. So if you know a better method, let me know in the comments down below, because I just put a lot of extra Mod Podge on there trying to make sure I could get those creases out. And then it comes with this cute truck. That's the second time I've said that. It came with this cute tree to put in the back of the truck. And then I'm going to put peace and joy at the top of the sign. And to seal everything in, and also to make them look less like stickers and more like it was drawn on there or painted on there, I'm going to go over each of these pieces with my matte Mod Podge, so that takes some of that gloss out using the matte Mod Podge. And you guys, I absolutely love this sign. It came out way better than I thought it would. It is so beautiful. I'll show you in just a minute how it looks with all of that Mod Podge dried. This is so gorgeous. Project, I am using this wooden snowman with the like little insert in the middle. This came from Dollar Tree, and it has some engravings on the front and it's plain on the back. And then I'm using 2 of the cube inserts, these wooden boxes that come from Dollar Tree. I just need the 2 inserts, and I'll set the outside aside for another DIY. I'm going to give each one of these 2 coats of my Waverly chalk paint in white, allowing each coat to dry in between. And I do paint the entire piece. I get down into the insert of that wood cutout as far as I can. You won't be able to see the inside part of it, but I just painted it down as far as I could get with my paintbrush. Now this is how they look once all the paint has dried, and it does cover up some of those engravings, but that's okay because we're going to decorate that ourselves with some markers and paint in a little while. I am also using 2 of these foam dice from Dollar Tree, and I give those 2 coats of my Waverly chalk paint in white as well, again allowing that paint to dry in between coats. These are so cute. They look like marshmallows. This is how they look once they are dry. And to put my numbers on there, I am using these stickers from Dollar General. These are $2 a pack. And I did have to use 2 packs because they only have 1 set of numbers in there. So on one of the cubes, I put 1 through 6. And the other one, I put 1, 2, 3, and then I put 7, 8, 9, and then I realized I don't have a 0. So for the cube that has the 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9, I just took the 3 off, and then I'll put my 0 in place of that. So the only days you would not be able to use it would be like the 33 days before Christmas, but that's okay. I just peeled the 3 off, and if it pulls a little bit of paint, you can always touch that up. But my 0 covered that little bit of paint that it did pull up just fine. I took my pencil and drew some eyebrows, and then just drew his eyes a little bit larger than it has like little cutouts for his eyes. And then I'm going to paint his hat with my Waverly chalk paint and ink. And I do paint both sides of both of the hats for the front and the back, just because once this is setting up and displayed, you will be able to see portions of these hats from the front and the back. And this only takes 1 coat of paint, and you get really good coverage with that. So once the paint has dried on the hat, I'm going to take my Folk Art Pure Orange to paint his nose. So it has the engravings for the nose, so I didn't have to draw that. I just went through the outline of the engravings there. And then to give the nose an outline, I'm going to use my Sharpie Ultra Fine Tip. And I'm going to do that for the outline of his nose. And then I started with his eyebrows and eyes, but it was not as dark as I wanted it. So I do go back in with my black oil-based Sharpie to give his eyes and his eyebrows some nice color. And then I do go back around the rim of his hat just because my paintbrush did not paint it as straight as I wanted it to. So I do go back and just straighten that up a little bit with my Sharpie. And this is how he's looking so far. He's so cute. So for the front, I'm going to put Days Till Christmas. And you can use these stickers. These come from Walmart. But you guys, my husband bought me a Cricut for my birthday recently, and I am so very excited to use it. So this was the first project I used it on. So I went ahead and went in Design Space and created Days Till Christmas, and I'm going to transfer that onto my snowman. Now, of course, you could always transfer it, like print it out and transfer it, trace it out, use carbon paper, but I was so excited to use this Cricut for the first time. And I love how it turned out. So once I transfer that on there, I am going to just peel that transfer paper back, and it is so pretty. I love the way this turned out. I'm using this buffalo check ribbon from Dollar Tree, and of course this is way too wide for his scarf, so I'm going to cut that down, and then I'm just going to cut that one strip that has the black and gray. And then I am going to hot glue that around to create his scarf. And then it does fray up a little bit because this is really thin ribbon. So I cut those extra pieces off, and then I'll show you how I fix it from fraying a little bit later on in the video. But I do go ahead and cut those few little pieces off. Then I'm going to take the cubes, and the two that have the designs, I'm going to glue those together with my hot glue, and I put a nice generous amount, and then just hold those together until that glue sets up. Then I'm going to glue the snowman on top of these two cubes, again putting a nice generous amount of hot glue on the bottom, and just try to center that up on top of these two cubes. And then once I get that set, I'm going to take my matte Mod Podge, and it doesn't matter if you use matte or gloss or whatever Mod Podge you have on hand, but I'm going to take that and go over his scarf just to keep that from fraying anymore. And I really like the fact that it did fray some because it gives it a very realistic look. Then I'm taking these LED lights from Dollar Tree, and it has like a mesh on the outside, and I did not want the mesh. So I very carefully cut that mesh off. Now you want to do this without the batteries in there because you don't want to accidentally cut that wire. But what I did was just cut around the end where the mesh was very carefully, not to cut the wire. And then I cut it on the other end as well, just around the mesh part. Of course, trying not to hit the wire, and then just pulled it off the end. Then I put my batteries in there, and of course made sure it was working before I started decorating the snowman. So I'm just going to put the battery pack inside that little insert and push it more towards the back. And to decorate, I am using these. I'm going to use 3 of these Christmas picks from Walmart. They're 98 cents a piece. And I absolutely love this red color in these picks. It has like 2 different greeneries and the pine cones and these beautiful frosted berries and this beautiful like red swirl piece to it. So I just held it up one on each side to see about how long I wanted it to be, and then I just bend that over, and then I cut those with my wire cutters, and it does take a little bit of effort because they have that wrapped. It's put together pretty good. For the middle one, I do have to cut the pine cone off because it won't fit down in the insert with the pine cone on there. So, and I didn't have to cut any of the length off of the middle one. So I'm going to cut just a little piece of styrofoam. This came from Dollar Tree to put down in the middle. And I thought that one would be enough, but it didn't have the height that I wanted because I wanted those berries to come up a little bit more above where his hat was. So I cut another piece and just glued that on there. And then I glued that into the cube insert there where the snowman is, right in the front. And then I'll put my battery pack behind that. And then I'll cut a couple of more pieces to put one on each side of the styrofoam, just to keep that center pick from swaying from left to right. And then I'm also going to cut 2 more pieces to put on the sides so that I can put the picks one on each side. And I just eyeballed it, cut those down, made sure that it fits right there in that side before I hot glue that down. And then I'll hot glue that, and then I'll put the pick one on each side. And I chose to put like the red swirly thing more towards the outside so that the pine cone and that red swirly piece will be on the outside of each side of the snowman. And then once I get those picks in there and kind of fluff them out the way I want them, I'm going to take my lights and just wrap them around each one of these picks until I get the look that I'm going for. And what I love about this snowman is his eyes have these little cutouts. So once you get the lights in there and feed them around, the light shows through his eyes. It's so pretty. I just absolutely love how this one turned out. So once I get my lights exactly where I want them, then you can just take your numbers and slide those right into your cubes, and you have a gorgeous countdown till Christmas. I absolutely adore how this project turned out. It is so cute. I really enjoyed making this project, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching it. I am using this wood sign from Dollar Tree, so beautiful, Peace on Earth. And then I am also using an 8x10 canvas. Now, sometimes you can find these at Dollar Tree. I am never lucky enough to find one at my Dollar Tree. So I found this one at Dollar General. It was $3. It is more of the fabric canvas instead of that vinyl type canvas. So again, this one was $3 from Dollar General. And I am going to paint my Peace on Earth sign with this Decor chalky finish. It is a beautiful gray colored paint. I will have a link to that in my description box below if you're interested. This only takes 1 coat, and I absolutely love how this color looks when it's dry. It is a beautiful gray. So I'm just going to paint the front of this sign and some of the edging, just because you'll be able to see the edges, but I don't paint the back because you're not going to be able to see that at all. So then I am going to take, because this is more of a fabric canvas, I'm going to give that 1 coat of paint in my Apple Barrel white acrylic paint. So if you have the vinyl type canvas, you could probably get away with not painting this, but because this was fabric, it has like a grayish type tint to it, and I wanted it to be a bright white because I want it to look more like wood. I'm going to distress this a little bit. So I wanted it to have a little bit more of like a bright white with then the distressing, instead of it all being like a monotoned white gray color. So I just took my ruler and I drew out, or just measured out like almost thirds, and drew those out with my pencil. And then I'm going to take that same gray paint and I'm just going to paint over those lines. And I also go over the ends of each of the canvases because you will be able to see those, you know, when it's hanging up. That way it'll look like 3 pieces of wood put together. And I'm not trying to be perfect. I kind of wanted it to be a little sloppy so it would look a little bit more realistic. Now I'm using my stiff, jagged like edged brush, and I am dry brushing the white acrylic paint all over the Peace on Earth sign. And then I'll take that same white paint and go over the lines that I painted with the gray. I did wait for that gray to dry before I went so I wouldn't smear that around too much. And then I'm going to take that gray paint again and I'm going to dry brush in between those lines, just trying to make it look more like a nice distressed piece of wood. And then I do go over the edges as well. And then once that paint has completely dried, I'm going to use this gorgeous ribbon that I found at Walmart. It is so beautiful. This gray matches perfectly with this gray paint, and it has these beautiful bright white snowflakes. And that's another reason why I wanted to paint that canvas, because these snowflakes were nice and bright and white. Now this was a roll of 25 feet for $4.98, which I think is a great deal because this is really thick, nice ribbon. And I just cut those down to length, and I am going to hot glue that on each end. And I just made sure that the ribbon was lined up with the top and the bottom pieces, like the outside edges, to make sure they were straight. And then once I get that secured down with the hot glue, I'm going to attach my Peace on Earth sign right there in the center with my hot glue. And then this sign, or this piece of wall art, is finished. And I think this is gorgeous. I absolutely love it. I love how those snowflakes just pop off that ribbon and how well the grays match. Wooden trees from Dollar General. They come 3 in a pack for $1. And these are really cute. It's just made of thin wood. I'm also using my Apple Barrel white acrylic paint, and I am using some Apple Barrel English Ivy green acrylic paint. And I am going to paint the largest and the smallest one on both sides with the white, and then the medium sized one with the English Ivy green. And I love the way these trees are because they're 3 different sizes and they're so cute. Now you see me take this off camera because I am using my hair dryer again to dry that paint before I set it down so I don't mess the paint up. So this is how it looks with 1 coat of paint on each one. And it gives it that nice bright white look. And then I just assemble them by just sliding the top piece over the bottom piece. And then I'm going to set these 3 trees to the side and create the base for my tray using this sign from Dollar Tree. I've gone ahead and removed the hanging piece off the back and filled that in with some wood filler. And then the top piece was already peeling up a little bit. So I used my hair dryer so that I could try to loosen that glue up and pull that paper off. And a lot of the paper stayed on there, but that's okay because I'm going to sand that down. And this is going to become the bottom of the tray anyway. And then I used that to soften up the glue to get the sticker out of the inside of the sign as well. Then I took some 100 grit sandpaper and sanded that down as much as I could. Again, this is on the bottom, and you want to make sure you clean all that extra paper off before you paint it. So I'm using my Waverly chalk paint in white, and I'm going to paint the entire sign, including the bottom and the inside, with the white paint, and it only takes 1 coat. I did put 2 coats on the inside, but it only took 1 on the rest of it. And then I am going to take my tree, my green tree, and I'm going to dry brush some of the white chalk paint on that to give it a nice snowy effect. So I'm just dipping it in there and then wiping most of it off before I very lightly just go over the tree, just to give it make it look like it's been snowed on. I am going to use these same LED lights that we used in the previous project, except I will leave the mesh on here. So I just put my batteries in. Of course, I always like to test mine to make sure they work before I put this together. I put a little bit of hot glue on the side that is not where you change the batteries. So you still want to be able to change your batteries. But I put it on the opposite side and just glued it to the back of the sign. And then I'm going to glue each one of my trees into the tray. And I'm just going to put a bead of hot glue right there on the bottom of each one of the trees. And I'm going to stagger these into the tray. So I start with my largest one to the back, more towards the left. And then I'll put the medium-sized one right there in the center, more towards the right. And then put the small one right there in the front. You could put it in here however you liked it, but I liked mine staggered, going more from the tall to the shortest, so you would be able to see all of them. Then I'm going to take the LED lights and just feed that around the bottom in between the trees. Now I use a little bit of hot glue, but I'm very careful because I just make sure that I put the hot glue, just tiny little beads, and then I push the mesh into the hot glue. So I'm not really hot gluing the wire, I'm just hot gluing the mesh down so that the lights will stay in there and not pop up. And I just kind of went around all the trees until I just got the lights kind of where I wanted them to. And this is super cute when you turn the lights on just the way it is, but I do want to fill mine up just to cover up the light strand. But this is so cute. I love these LED lights. They're so pretty. So I'm going to use some of this vase filler. They're just styrofoam balls. This came from Dollar Tree, and they have the white that has almost like a opal glitter to it, and then the silver. And I just fill these in until I get the look that I want. And then once I get all of those in place, this project is finished. And it is so pretty. When you turn the lights off, it almost looks like these trees are sitting on ice. It is so gorgeous. I love how this project turned out as well, and I hope you did too. A couple of these trees. This came from Walmart. You get a 16-piece set for $7.98. And I'm only going to use the 2 larger trees and then 2 of the medium-sized trees. And these are really nice, high quality. I love the dark green color of these trees. And I'm also going to be using this silver plastic tray from Dollar Tree. And this is very elegant looking and very beautiful. I'm using one of these fur mufflers, and I cut it down to size, and I'm going to hot glue it to the bottom. But you guys, don't do this. This did not work for me. I mean, it glued down to the tray perfectly fine, but when I got ready to decorate it, my pieces that I put on top of it just were not sturdy enough, so I do end up having to take this back off. So this part of this project was a complete fail. So I think it was just perhaps it was too furry and they just would not sit down and be sturdy enough. It was just too wobbly for me. So I don't recommend using this at all, but I will show you what I do use instead. So I do remove that. I'm going to be using one of these Snowman Christmas ornaments from Dollar General for $3. This is so adorable. It's on skis. It's just so cute. I'm going to remove the tag, and then I am going to hot glue this to the tray once I remove that fur muffler from the bottom of it. And I'm just going to straighten and tidy him up and make sure all of his beard and everything is straight and in place. And then I'm just going to put this more to the side like he is actually skiing. And that is why I wanted to use that fur muffler to look like he was in some very thick snow. But I do come up with a different way to look like he is on snow. So I just attach that somewhat to the center and then sort of to the side so he's at an angle. And then I'm going to attach the 2 larger trees in the back corners of the tray using hot glue and making sure that that sets up. And then I'm also going to be using the 2 medium-sized trees as well. So once I get that attached, I just wanted to make sure it was nice and secure and nothing moved around. So that was perfect. Then I just put the medium-sized trees a little bit more to the front so it looks like he's coming down a mountain in between the trees. Once I get those on, I will be using some of my Mod Podge. You can use matte gloss, whatever you like, but I do have matte Mod Podge on hand. And I'm going to use some of the fake snow that came in the package with the Christmas trees from Walmart. So I just put a nice generous amount of Mod Podge on the bottom of the tray and go around each of the trees and almost a little bit on top of the trees' bases. And then any excess that I get on the sides of the tray, I do wipe off because I don't want the faux snow on the sides of the tray. I only want it on the bottom. And then whatever extra snow you have on there, once the Mod Podge dries, you can just shake that off. But I do make sure I put a nice generous amount, and then I'm just going to take that snow and shake it out all over the Mod Podge, and then I'll take the tray and just kind of shake it around and make sure that snow gets on all of those tree bases and all around the bottom of the tray. And I'm going to do this for the entire tray. And I also go around under the bottom of his skis as well to make sure that some snow stays under the bottom of that, so it does look like he is actually on the snow. Once I get all of that on there and I let that Mod Podge dry, this project will be finished. And I absolutely love how this turned out. You'll have to let me know in the comments down below if you like this project as well. So once I get all that shook around, I'll show you how it looks. It's so beautiful. I just love this snowman ornament. So cute. How adorable is that? We are using a 2.8-inch styrofoam ball from Dollar Tree and one of the 2.4-inch styrofoam balls, again from Dollar Tree. I'm going to take the larger ball and I'm going to cut, maybe it's not even a quarter of the bottom off. I just want this to be able to sit flat. And then I'm going to take the smaller one and cut a very small end of that one off as well, so that this will sit on top of the larger styrofoam ball flat. So in order to get that to sit flat, I'm going to take the larger styrofoam ball and cut the opposite end of what I cut originally, but cut a very, very small portion, just a sliver of that off, so that the smaller styrofoam ball will be able to sit on top of that. We're going to be creating a Snowwoman. So you guys, this is the video I'll be using my pink in. I took a bamboo skewer and just determined the size of how long I wanted it to be so that I can insert this into the two styrofoam balls to make sure that it is sturdy. So I cut that down with my scissors and just snap that apart. And then I'm just going to push that down in the center of the larger styrofoam ball and then attach the smaller one right on top, right in the center. And then I will take my hot glue gun, make sure it is on a low setting, and then I'm going to put some hot glue under that small styrofoam ball just to make sure it stays in place. And then I'll push that back down on top of the larger one. Now I'm using some hemp rope, and you can find this at Walmart. It's very inexpensive. I love to use hemp rope because it is very smooth finish. It doesn't have a lot of string. And I'm going to hot glue this all the way around these styrofoam balls. So the first, when I begin, I make sure I use the hot glue all the way around, and then I use the hot glue periodically as I'm going until I get to the top of the smaller styrofoam ball. And then I'm just going to make sure that I go around in a nice neat circle. And then once I get right there to the end, I will cut that excess off and push that last piece down into the center and secure that with hot glue. To decorate this Snowwoman, I'm using one of these pink fuzzy socks. This actually came from Target Dollar Spot for $1. And I just cut a strip off to create a scarf. And then I'm going to cut that strip in half and then wrap it around the center of the two styrofoam balls. And I'm going to secure that down with hot glue. And then once I get to the end, I will cut the excess off, and I'll use that excess to create the other part of the scarf. So just get to the end, and then I'll cut that down, and then I'll actually feed that excess piece right into the piece that's already attached to the styrofoam. And then I'm going to glue that down so it looks like it's blowing in the wind. So just push that down and put a little bit of hot glue on there, and then push it to the side a little bit so it looks like it's blowing. And then I'm going to take the tip of one of these bamboo skewers, and I'm going to paint it with my Folk Art acrylic pure orange paint to create the nose, and then I'll set that to the side and let it dry. To create the arms for the snow lady, I took the same bamboo skewer and just cut maybe like 2¼ inches, two of those, and then I'm going to snip one of the pieces of hemp rope and just insert those skewers into the sides to create the arms. And I'm going to do that for both sides. And then I'm going to take the hemp rope and I am going to hot glue it around these skewers to give it a nice finished look. And again, I'm just going to start off with a little bit of hot glue and put that hemp rope around there, and then I'll wrap it all the way to the end. And once I get to the end, I just squeeze the end together to close that off. And I'm going to do that for both sides, for both arms. And then once I get the second arm done, I will be creating her eyes. So I'm just going to put that hemp rope on there. And you guys, I know her arms are crooked, but I do fix this. And I'll show you later on in the video because I really did not like where I put her arms at. So to create the eyes, I'm going to use some cardstock. These are just some scrap pieces that came from the Crafter's Square section in Dollar Tree. And I just took a piece of the black cardstock out and used a hole punch and punched 2 holes and used those pieces to create her eyes. Now you could paint this. I just didn't think that it was going to give me a nice pretty circle by painting it because they're rope pieces. So I just placed the eyes where I wanted them to be, and then I'm going to secure that down with just a bead of hot glue on each one. And then this is where I realize her arms are so crooked and so out of place. So to fix that, I just pulled them out because I did not hot glue them in. So they were very easy to pull out. And to fix the place that I pulled them out from, I just put a little bit of hot glue and cut a tiny piece of that hemp rope and put that right in there, and it fixed it right up. You can't even tell that it was there. And I'm going to remove the other side too. So then I just placed those where I wanted. It was super easy. You just push those into the styrofoam. And then I realized, oh my goodness, now her scarf is behind her arm. That's okay. I'm going to cut another strip and put that in the front. So now she has a very poofy, elegant scarf. And I'm going to glue that down as well. Then I'm using 2 buttons and then some 18 gauge wire that's very bendable. You could find this wire at Michael's, Hobby Lobby. I'm not sure, you may be able to find it at Walmart, not sure. But I just take the end and push it through one of the holes on the button, and then I'm going to bend that around and push it through, back through the other hole. So now it's nice and secure on the outside. So to secure it on the inside of the button, I just bend the piece the end piece over, and then I'll cut that excess off. So now the button will not come loose from the wire. I'll push that in and make sure it's flat. And here's a little bit of a closer look how it looks. And I'm going to create earmuffs. So I just pulled some wire out, and then I took one of my larger paint brushes and I started where the thicker part of the brush is and wrap the wire around until I get to the smaller end of the brush. Then I'm going to flip that around, put my brush back into those spirals, and then wrap it around until it goes back to the larger part of the brush. So the larger loops will be where the buttons are, and then it'll get thinner as it goes to the middle. And then I will attach the button on the other end just like I attached the first button by feeding it through the hole and then bringing it back through the hole. Then I'll bend that over and cut that excess off so that button will be secure. And then to cover the buttons up, I'm going to cut a little bit of the pink fabric from the sock off, And I'm just going to hot glue that to each one of those buttons until it covers the button completely. So I just took some hot glue, put it all around the button, and then just take that square of fabric and wrapped it around until all of it was covered. And these make the cutest pink earmuffs. And I'm going to do that for both of the buttons. And then I will attach it to the snow lady by using hot glue. And I do use a good amount of hot glue to attach these because I wanted to make sure that they do not pop off. So just figure out exactly where you want to place them and then make sure you hold that in place until that glue sets up. And then do that for the other side as well. And then I did not like that the bottom still, it was not covered, and I didn't want to use the rope on the bottom because then I didn't think that it would sit flat. So I just took some of the cardstock, traced the bottom, cut that out to size, and then attached that to the bottom with hot glue. Now it has a nice finished look and you don't get styrofoam everywhere as it's sitting up. Then I cut the excess of the end of that bamboo skewer off, and instead of pushing this because I didn't want to mess the rope up, I just hot glued the nose right there in the center. And then to create the to create the mouth, I missed some of the footage here, but these little pink stickers came from Dollar Tree. They're on a sheet. They come in the Crafter Square section. They're just tiny pink stickers. And I placed those on there and just figured out how I wanted the mouth to look. And then I hot glued each one of those down. And instead of putting buttons on the front, I'm going to use these snowflake stickers. This came from Hobby Lobby when they were having their 50% off Christmas sale. And I just took 2 of those stickers and placed them right on the front. And I just love the way that white popped off. So it gave me an idea to make some mittens. I'm going to use the same fur muffler that I used in DIY number 1 that did not work out in my favor. And I'm just going to cut some tiny strips off of the back, not the furry part, but the backing on that fur muffler. And then I'm going to hot glue that around the ends of the arms to create cuffs for the mittens. And I'm going to do that for both sides. Just making sure that you squeeze that end down so it's nice and flat and flush to the end of those arms. And then I'm going to take some of the pink sock and I just cut a little square and I'm going to glue and fold it over and keep gluing until I create almost like a tiny pom-pom. It's like a ball, like a little pink ball. If you had some pink pom-poms, that would work perfect, but I'm sure they probably would not match as well. So I just glued these over on top of each other until I created a tiny ball. I'm going to create 2 of those, and then I'm going to glue those onto the end. So that will be the pink mittens, and then the white part looks like the cuffs on the ends of the mittens. And once I get those on, this project will be finished. And this is so adorable. I think this would be so cute in a little girl's room. Or if you're decorating for Christmas in pink, it's absolutely cute. I just love how she turned out. This nativity scene, this came from Dollar General for $3. This is so nice quality. I took them out. They do have a little bit of rough edges around each of the cutout pieces. So I do take my sandpaper and go over each one of these pieces to make sure I get all that rough edge off so it'll have a nice, clean, smooth look when I'm finished. And I'm going to use 13 of the tumbling tower pieces. You can get these at Dollar Tree. And I'm going to paint each one of these pieces with 2 coats of my Waverly chalk paint in white. So as I mentioned earlier, each of us had to challenge another lady in our collaboration with an item, and Kelly from Home with Kelly P challenged me to use wood, and so I will be using some wood in this third project of this video today. So to assemble these pieces, I'm using some Gorilla Wood glue and hot glue, and I'm going to attach this to the back of this nativity scene because I wanted this to pop off of the sign and just stand front and center and just stand out more than the other pieces. So I put some wood glue in the center and hot glue on the outside. That wood glue is going to create that permanent hold, and the hot glue is just going to create that temporary hold for now. And I'm going to place the tumbling tower pieces all around the back side of this sign. And on the sides, I do make sure that each of those are very close together so it'll look like almost like a wall when you put all your pieces together on the sign. And then make sure at the top that you place those so you cannot see it from the front or through the hole there at the star at the top. And then I'm going to be using well, once I get all this excess glue off, and I'm going to be using one of these scrap pieces of wood that I had in my shop. It's 12 inches tall and it is 28 inches wide. And I am just going to line my nativity scene up where I want it to be on the sign. And again, using my Gorilla Wood glue and my hot glue, I'm going to secure all these pieces down. And I just love how this one is turning out. I love the way this white pops off of this wood. You could even paint your wood a darker color. Oh, that would stand out so pretty. Now, if you don't have wood, you could always use foam board and paint that, but this is just a piece that I had sitting out in my shop. So I just line all of the pieces up the way I want them to be. And then again, I'm just going to attach those with the wood glue and with the hot glue. And this was a super easy and super simple project, but I love how this piece came out. I'll show you in just a second how this one turned out. So beautiful. Once I remove the tree from the box, I'm going to take the cap off of the end and I'm going to fluff it out, but I'm going to leave the bottom flat because I'm going to be creating a teardrop swag. To fill in those bare spots, I use some garland ties from Dollar Tree. They also sell these at Dollar General. And I just take a few of those and twist them around in those bare spots to give it a nice full look. As I get to the bottom of the swag, I will wrap the middle piece twice so that I'll have the same length as the other branches. And then for the very bottom, I will just cut one of those ties in half and twist that around. I then took some Waverly chalk paint in white and a chippy brush and went over the entire piece and under those branches as well, just to give it a nice snowy effect. Once the paint has completely dried, I then use some decorative nautical rope, which came from Dollar Tree, to create the hanger for the top of the swag. I hot glued the end and then wrapped that around the top part. Well, this is now the top part of the tree. And then I'll hot glue that right before I create the loop to determine how long I want my hanger to be. And then I will glue the other side, cut that down, and wrap it in the opposite direction that I wrapped the first piece and secure that down with some hot glue. I do add a little bit more hot glue to make sure that it will hang straight once this is finished. I then took some of the decorative bells from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to use 3 of those and some hemp rope. I feed that through and tie a knot and then use some glue to hold that in place, cut the extra off, and then determine the length that I want the longest bell to be on the swag. And then I'll create the second one and tie it slightly above the longer bell and secure that down with hot glue as well. So I do double knot that when I'm tying it to the longer strand. And then I will do the same thing for the third bell tying it on the other side, making it slightly shorter than the second bell. And once I have all of that glued and tied, I will glue the knot right there at the top of the swag and take the extra and wrap it around just to give it a little bit more stability to make sure that those don't fall off. And then I will use some hot glue to glue that and cut the end off. I'm using this pick from Dollar General. This was $2, and I cut the branches from the bundle, and I'm not going to use all of those in this DIY. I will use the remainder of them in the DIY later on in this video, but I cut it down to size, and I'm going to use some of Dollar Tree's floral wire to secure parts of this to the swag. I just determined where I wanted to put it, and then I take the floral wire and attach the top piece to one of the branches and then twist it down very tightly in the back, and then I'll go in later and cut the extra floral wire off. To make sure that it keeps the shape of the teardrop, I use some hot glue and glue those berries down at the bottom, and I will repeat this on the opposite side using another one of the branches. Again, using the floral wire at the top and then using some hot glue just to keep that shape. Once I have all of this in place, I will be creating my ribbon or my bow with some ribbon, and I'm using some ribbon, buffalo check ribbon from not Dollar Tree. You can get it at Dollar Tree, but I am using the buffalo check ribbon from Hobby Lobby. It is a little bit not as wide as the ones from Dollar Tree because this is a smaller swag. I just determined how long I wanted the tails to be and then how large I wanted the loop to be at the top, and I will cut 2 of those the same length, and then I'm going to create some more loops for the center. I am not a professional bow maker. This is just how I decided to make this one for this swag. I made some loops about the same size as the other 2, and I'll cut that down and cut 3 strips of those the same size so that I can have 3 loops in between the 2 outer ones. And then I will use a chenille stem to attach them all together. So I just like to fold those in half and put those 3 in between the 2 outer pieces with the tails. And then I'll squeeze the center really tightly and then very tightly twist the chenille stem around that. And once I had this finished, I didn't think that it was full enough. Once I fluffed those loops out, I just didn't feel that it was a full enough bow for this. So I will create some more to go right in front of that. I just take the buffalo check ribbon and create 2 loops on each side, and then I will secure that with a chenille stem as well. I just made sure that those loops were similar to size as the ones that I'd already made. And once I loop that around, so I have 2 on each side, I will take a chenille stem, squeeze that together in the middle, and then attach that, or just cut that excess off, squeeze that around, and then twist it really tightly, and then I'll cut that extra little piece in the back so you won't see that, and then the loops that I had at the top, where those 3 in the middle, I'll cut that extra off as well, so it'll have a nice clean look. Once I've cut that, I can attach it to the swag using the chenille stems and just attach those at the very top, right in between the hanger I've created and where the bells are hanging. And just make sure that I attach that really well so it doesn't fall off. And then I can put the other bow that I made right in the front. I'm not going to cut the ends of the chenille stems off just yet. I will go in and cut all of these extra floral wire and chenille stems off of the back later. I just attach that bow, and once I get that in place, I can fluff the bow out to make sure that it has the fullness that I am looking for. I didn't want the tails to just freely fall. I wanted them to take more of the shape of the Teardrop Swag. So I feed those under the branches and then pull a little bit of excess up in between to give it some fullness. And once I get that exactly where I like it, I'll go in and do the other side as well. And I will be securing this down with some hot glue. You don't have to do that, but I just wanted to make sure that mine had that teardrop look rather than the bows just taking away from the shape of the swag. Once I get those exactly where I want them to be, I just put a little bit of glue just to hold it in place at the top and at the bottom. And once I get those where I want them, I'm also going to dovetail the ends of the tails of the bow. And I am just loving how this is coming out. So once those dovetails have been cut, I could finish decorating this. And I'll just glue those down at the bottom just to keep a little bit of shape and a little poofiness there. You'll have to let me know in the comments down below if you like how project number 1 is turning out. And I found, I felt like it needed a little bit more at the top, so I took some of those bundle from Dollar General and glued that right at the top to give it a little bit more of those greenery leaves. And again, I will secure that down with a floral wire, as well as use a little bit of hot glue just to hold that in place. And now I am just clipping all of those extra floral wire, and I'll go in and get those chenille stems. And I'm using these white berries from Hobby Lobby when they were having their 50% off sale. I just cut a few of the branches down and hot glued them where I thought they looked best. And I used just four of those little branches, and then cut the excess chenille stems off, and this swag is finished. And I think it turned out very, very pretty. I really like how this one turned out. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of. I'm using this round wood hanging decor piece from Dollar Tree. I'm going to go ahead and remove that tag. And then to fill in those holes, I'm just going to use some spackling and rub that in smooth, and then I'll set that to the side and let that dry. I am also using one of these wooden birdhouses from Dollar Tree. I got this back in the summer, and I'm going to be using some black chalkboard craft paint. I purchased this from Dollar General. You could actually just go ahead and paint this entire birdhouse, but I'm going to be covering the front, back, and the two sides with some scrapbook paper, so I didn't bother painting the center of those pieces. But I did make sure that I painted the roof and underneath the roof. And then I also go ahead and paint that back piece through the circle so you wouldn't see just the wood. Once that paint has dried, to cover these outside pieces, I am using this black and red buffalo check scrapbook paper from Hobby Lobby. And I'm just going to cut this down to a close enough size so that I can cover the back part of the birdhouse. And I just hold it up. Once I figured out which design I wanted to put on there, I'm just going to hold that up against the back and then press firmly with my fingers to make indentions so I'll know where to cut that roof line down at. So then I'll just cut right there below at the bottom of that roof line, and then I'll place that up there, make sure that it does fit, and then do that for the bottom and the sides as well, and then I'll just cut those down. And then I'll take that same piece, since it's the same size for the front and the back, I'm just going to line that up on my scrapbook paper so I make sure I get the same design, because I wanted the same design to go all the way around the birdhouse. And then I'll just trace that out and cut that down. And then to get the to make sure I can get the hole and then the perch for the front of the birdhouse, once I get this piece cut down, I'll hold that top point up to the roof line, and then I can use my finger to make the indentation of where the hole is. And then once I get that indentation good enough in there where I can see it, I'm going to take a hole punch so that I can punch a hole in there so I can start to cut it. And I couldn't see it very well because it was on the dark part of the paper. So I do go in with pencil to trace around where those indentions are. And now that I have made that hole, I can just take my scissors and cut the center of that hole out so that it will fit nice and smooth on top of the birdhouse. And then for the perch part, once I place the paper back on there, I can make an indentation on the top of the perch with my finger. Just make sure I just get the top part of that perch, and then I can take my hole punch and cut out right where that indentation is. And then I always dry fit it and make sure everything is fitting onto the birdhouse before I'll glue anything down. So I've got my front and back pieces, and now it's time to cut the side pieces. And again, I want to make sure my design goes the same way all the way around the birdhouse. So I'm just going to take my scrapbook paper and cut down the image where the design is to a more manageable size piece. And then I'm going to take that and put it up against the back of the birdhouse, and then I can make my indentation at the bottom part of where the roof is. And this will make a little bit more sense here shortly. Once I hold that up there, I can just push that down where the roof line is, so I'll know that the bottom part of that corner is where I need to cut to go across, so that I'll have the height on the scrapbook paper that I'll need for the side. And once I get that cut down, I can just line it up on the side and then press those sides down to make my indentation so I'll know where to cut. And then the other side will be exactly the same as this piece. So you can just take that, line it up on your scrapbook paper, and then trace it out and cut it down, or just cut around the piece that you already have pressed up against the scrapbook paper. And then once I get all of my pieces cut down and I know they're going to fit good, I'm going to take some Mod Podge, and I use matte Mod Podge. That way it doesn't have a super glossy finish when you're done. And I'm going to apply it all over the front, back, and sides of the birdhouse, apply my paper and smooth it out, and then I will go back in and put the Mod Podge over top of all the paper, and then I'll set that to the side and let it dry completely. Now that my spackling has dried on the round wood plaque, I'm going to give that one very heavy coat of my Waverly chalk paint in white, and then I'll set that to the side to dry. Now that the birdhouse has dried from the paint and the Mod Podge, I felt like it needed a little bit of snow on there. So I'm just taking my Mod Podge and emphasizing mostly on the roof peak, and then just sporadically around the roof. And then I'm going to sprinkle this artificial snow. This came in a package from Walmart with some trees. And then I'm also going to go ahead and put that around the edging at the bottom part of the birdhouse as well. And for the hole that I had cut out, that center, I just took my sandpaper and sanded that down real smooth to give it a nice clean finish right there where I had cut that hole out. Now it's time to assemble this piece, so I'm just going to hot glue the birdhouse down more towards the side of the plaque. And then I'm using this cute pick that came from Dollar Tree that has this really cute red bird on it. And I'm going to pull the clip off of the bottom, and then I'm going to hot glue the pick on the other side of the birdhouse. And then I'll just rearrange the branches and fluff those out and place them where I want them to be. And this project is complete, and I think this is so cute. And you could decorate this in so many ways. You could use it just as it is, or you can set it on top of a candle holder, like a tea light with a flameless candle in it, and it's super cute. Wreath form from Dollar Tree. You can get 2 in a pack for $1. And I'm also going to be using this 2-inch wired natural burlap. This came from burlapfabric.com, and I'll have a link to their website in my description box below. This is a nice size roll. It has 10 yards in it, and like I said, it's the natural burlap. And I'm just going to take this and pull it underneath, and then I'm going to hot glue it to itself so I can attach that there so I can wrap this entire wreath form. I just like to put the hot glue on there and then flip it over and glue it to itself, including the top part of that wire form, and let that set up before I begin wrapping it. And as I wrap it, I am going to I'm going to leave about a quarter of that burlap ribbon right there on the edge, and I'm going to try to do this all the way around so it looks like a quarter part of that overlapping. I hope that makes sense. And I'm just gluing periodically. I'm not gluing consistently, so when you're finished and you glue your last piece on there, you can still fluff it around and move it a little bit because not all the pieces are glued together. To decorate this, I'm using this owl Christmas ornament from Dollar Tree, and I just cut the hanger off of the top of it, and then I'm gonna I didn't really like all that long greenery on there, so I do trim a lot of that down. I liked the greenery, I just felt like it was a little too long. And then I'm going to glue that to the bottom of the wreath, and I use a good amount of hot glue. Let that set up, and then I'm taking some of these garland ties from Dollar Tree, and I've gone ahead and painted some of them with my white chalk paint to give it a snowy look. And then I just glue those down around the bottom part of the owl just to kind of fill it in a little more, to give it more fullness and to look a little more high end. And then I'm going to go in after I attach this greenery with some red berries. These came from Dollar Tree, and it's just some leftovers that I had in my craft room. And I'm going to cut down a couple of these smaller bunches and then glue those on the greenery as well. And then I have some mini pine cones. These came from Hobby Lobby when they were having their Christmas sale. But I do believe that Dollar Tree sells these as well, the very small pine cones. And I'm just going to place those around the bottom part where the greenery is. And then to give it a little bit more high-end look, I'm going to glue a few on each side of the owl so it almost looks like he's sitting in the trees. And then I'm going to take some more berries and glue those around where the pine cones are. And then a couple right there, well, like one right in the center on each side, just to give it a little bit of color on the sides. And then to create the hanger, I'm going to use the same red and black buffalo check ribbon. This came from Hobby Lobby, and it matches perfectly with the front of this owl. And I'm just going to feed that through and then glue the ribbon to itself, and then I'll cut that extra on the back of it off so that it's flush at the top. And then I'm going to pull about the length that I want the hanger to be ×2. So I'm going to make it twice as long because I'm going to loop it back down, and this will make a little more sense here shortly. But once I cut that down, I'm just going to fold it down and then flip it over so the design shows on the front. And this is going to create the hanger. And you could hang this up on a window with like a suction cup, or it would look great hanging on a very small door like a linen closet with a command strip. And then I created a very simple bow. I am not a professional bow maker, but I just put 2 loops and then have my tails together, and then I will squeeze the center together and attach that with some hemp rope, and I'm going to double knot that rope around there. Once I got that tied, I didn't like that the tail was sticking in the front of one of the loops, so I do loosen my knot up a little bit, and then I'll take that tail that's in the front and feed it through the loop. And then I'll tighten that back up, that hemp rope back up, to make it a nice secure fit. And then I'm going to dovetail the ends of my bows after I cut this excess hemp rope off. And then after I dovetail it, I'm going to attach my bow to the hanger right there where it is attached to the wreath. And then I'm going to fluff my bow out nice and pretty. and this project will be finished, and it is so super cute. I really love how this one turned out. And if you had a very large tree, you could use this as an ornament as well. But I think it would be so cute hanging in a kitchen window. Cardboard deer ornaments from Dollar General. They come four for $2, and I will be using 3 of those. I removed the hangers and then the bows with the bells, but I did keep the bows with the bells, and I'll use those later on in the video. To fill in the holes, I used some spackling on both sides of the deer, and then I took a skewer just to create that little indentation that's already in there. Then I waited for that to dry, and I took some Apple Barrel Warm Buff and some Apple Barrel Nutmeg acrylic paint and mixed those together to try to get a very similar color to what the deer already was, because I want to keep it that color. It's not necessary to do both sides, but I did go ahead and get both sides of the deer painted because I will be covering up one side. After that paint dried, I'm going to be creating some scarves for the deers, and I am just using some scrap ribbon that I already had on hand. I'm going to be using 2 of the red and black and 1 of the white and black buffalo check, and I'm just going to fold that until I get it to the width that I want it to be for the scarf, and then I'll glue that together, and then I'll glue that around the deer. So I'll be creating 2 of the deer with the red and black and 1 with the white and black. And I'm just going to glue that around, making sure that I leave enough space to cover up that hole that's in the front where the hanger was. Once I get that glued in place, I'll cut it down to the length I want, and then I'm going to cut slits in the end to make it look more like a realistic scarf. And I'm going to do that for all 3 deer. For the base of this project, I am using a base that came off of a nativity set from Dollar General, and I've already used the nativity set in a previous DIY, and this was the base that came in that pack, which was perfect. It has these 3 little grooves, and these deer fit perfectly in there. I'm just going to glue 1 in each of the slats, spacing them apart, and I'm just using some hot glue. And once I get these in place, this project is finished. So simple and easy, but yet I love how it turned out. And you can leave this up all winter long, not just for Christmas. I am using one of these beautiful landscape scenes from the Shriners Hospital calendar, and I used my Cricut cutter to cut out the picture that I wanted to use, which is this gorgeous winter scene. I'm using one of these plastic 8x10 frames from Dollar Tree that has that wood grain look in the front, and I just removed the glass and the paper, and now I'm just going to take my scenery picture there and cut it down to size so that it will fit on the back of the frame. I took a glue stick and just attached the photo onto the back of the frame and made sure I got all those wrinkles out. I'm using some of these assorted wooden dowels. They come with some square dowels in there, so I'm using one of those and then a piece of one that I had left over that came out of that pack. And I'm going to mark the center of each side of the frame so I will know where to place my dowels. After I get those centers marked, I'm going to mark the longest dowel to 10 inches because that's the width of the frame, and then I'm going to use my handsaw to cut that down to size. I'm just going to place that in there for now so that I can measure the top and bottom pieces. After I get those measured out, I'll go ahead and again use my handsaw to cut those down. Then I'll take some sandpaper and make sure I smooth those ends out so it'll fit flushly within the frame. I go ahead and hot glue the centerpiece down, and then I'm going to mark the center of that so I'll know where my top and bottom pieces need to meet. Then I will glue those pieces into place by making sure I put some glue on the end and getting that flush right there where that middle wood piece is. Then I took some Waverly chalk paint in white, and I only gave my frame one coat because I wanted it to have a nice distressed look because it already has that dark brown on there. I wanted to make sure that that wood grain and then a little bit of that brown peeked through so it looked distressed and a little bit rustic. Then I just simply placed my photo back into the frame, pushed the little tabs down, and this project is finished. And I absolutely love how it turned out. It's like you're standing inside of a cabin looking out of the window at this gorgeous scene. I am using this tin mailbox. This came from Dollar General for $1. And I go ahead and remove that sticker off the bottom. And then I'm going to give mine 3 coats of Waverly chalk paint in white. You could absolutely spray paint this, but it was raining on the day that I was crafting this, so I just opted to go ahead and use my chalk paint and paint it, and I think it turned out really nice. Then I took some painter's tape and went around the flag because although the flag is red, it was a little bit too bright. So I'm going to use some Folk Art Christmas Red acrylic paint, and I'm going to give that 2 coats on the front and back of the flag, just to darken it up just a little bit. Then I'm going to set that to the side to dry and create the base. I am using one of these boxes that has a drawer insert. I just needed the outside. Then one of the bamboo cutting boards. And then one of these cardboard tubes. This came out of a Deco mesh roll. And it was nice and thick, so I chose to use that. And I used my handsaw to cut that down so I could get a nice flush cut at the top. Took some sandpaper and went over that to get those rough edges off. And mine measured about 9.5 inches. Out of this Dollar Tree puzzle piece, I'm going to use one of those wooden round pieces. Then to attach my box to the cutting board, I'm using some Gorilla Wood glue and some hot glue. And I'm just going to place that at the edge right there in the center. So this will create the box for the mailbox post. With some E6000 and some hot glue, and then I put some hot glue right there in the back to make sure it stayed flush. I put that cardboard tube in there and let that glue set up. And then I put some E6000 and hot glue on the top to place that round wooden piece so the mailbox would be able to sit flush on there. I gave this piece, the entire piece, 2 coats of my Waverly chalk paint in white. And I did go down inside of the lamp post box about 1/4 of the way, just in case you could see that. Once that has dried, now it is time to decorate it. And I will be using 4 of Dollar Tree's garland ties. And I'm going to go ahead and give those a nice dusting of my chalk paint. And I did that on the front and back of each piece. And then I made sure they were dry before I attached 2 of them together. I'm just going to twist it around each other to make one long piece. And then I took some of Dollar Tree's berry garland and twisted that around the garland tie. And then I'm going to take some of Dollar Tree's battery operated white lights and twist that around the garland tie as well. Once I get that in place, I can just put the battery pack inside the box for the lamppost. And I'm just showing you here, that's where it's going to sit, but I do have to move it out of the way so that I can wrap the garland around the lamppost. And then once I get that where I want it, I'm just going to hot glue the top piece to the cardboard tubing so it'll stay in place. Now this part is completely optional. I am using the greenery off of one of these Dollar Tree picks. I wanted it because they were a little bit longer, but you could certainly use one of the garland ties. And then I took a piece of a pool noodle and cut that down so I could use that in the box to set my greenery pieces in. Once I get all of that in place, I am going to take those 3 greenery pieces and then a handful of mini pine cones. Now these pine cones came from Hobby Lobby, but Dollar Tree does sell these mini pine cones. And I gave each of those a nice dusting of my white chalk paint. Then I took some of Dollar Tree's cubes and I hot glued 4 together. So I made 2 sets of 4. And then well, it was 4 sets of 4, but I'm going to glue 2 of those together. So you're going to need 4 sets of 4, and then I glued 2 together. And then I took some of the tumbling tower pieces and I glued 3 of those together, and then the other 3 I will glue on top of that. So I'm making these tiny little presents. And then I took 9 more tumbling tower pieces so I could stack that 3 high. So it'll be 3 pieces, and then it'll be 3 sets of that glued together. Gosh, I hope that made sense, you guys. I'm using some burlap fabric and some buffalo check fabric. Now, the burlap fabric came from burlapfabric.com, and the buffalo check fabric came from Dollar Tree. And I am just going to wrap these boxes just like you would wrap a Christmas present. And I'm using some hot glue to hold that in place. And I'm going to wrap 3 of these in the buffalo check print. And then I'm going to wrap 2 of these in the burlap fabric print. Now, if you use the burlap fabric, please be very careful because it's really thin and it has those tiny little holes in there, so you don't want to burn yourself with the hot glue. And once I get those together, I will be stacking some of them on top of each other, and I just like the contrast of the colors. So now that I have all of those wrapped and the greenery pieces have dried, I'm just going to place those in the styrofoam until I fill that in, and then I'm going to glue some pine cones in there. Now, don't glue the pine cones on the left-hand side because you have to be able to remove your battery pack so that you could change your batteries out. So I just filled those in with the pine cones, and then I took those bows with the bells from project number 1, and I just wrapped the boxes around, or wrapped the bow around the box and glued that in place on the larger one, and then I stacked some of the smaller ones together, alternating between the buffalo check and the burlap. And once I got those bows in place, I just hot glued them down to the base of the lamppost right in front of where the mailbox will be, just like someone had delivered these packages. And then I'll glue some mini pine cones around a couple of these presents. And I just love how this is turning out. It is so pretty. So now it's time to decorate the mailbox, and I'm using the other 2 garland ties, and I'm going to cut one in half, and I'm just going to place them on top of the mailbox to shape them, and then I'll cut that longer piece down. So I wanted the centerpiece to be longer than the other 2 pieces, so it would look like a swag on top of the mailbox. And I'm using one of these mini wreaths from Dollar Tree. This fit perfect. I just cut it in half with my scissors, and I did go in and trim all those extra little tall green pieces that were sticking up that didn't have anything attached to them. I'm going to hot glue those 2 together facing each other. Well, the floral is away, but the little greenery pieces facing each other. Then I hot glued the garland ties on top of the mailbox and made sure that I glued those ends down so that would create the base of the swag. And then I put an excessive amount of hot glue on top to hold those flowers, the wreath ring, right on top. Then any pieces that came apart, just glue those together and then move your flowers and your pine cones around to cover that greenery piece at the bottom. Then I took some E6000 and hot glue, placed that on top of the mailbox, and then held that in place until that glue set up. And it took a couple of minutes for it to set up, and this is how it turned out. I just love how this mailbox turned out. It is so pretty. Some of these dowels from this assorted wooden dowel piece from Walmart, and I picked out 5 of the same size dowels and laid those out until I had the desired shape for my star. And then I'm just going to hold that middle piece down and mark it with my pencil so that I will know where to put my glue after I glue these 2 outside dowels together. So I'm just going to overlap one on top of the other and just glue that down. And then I can glue that piece straight across. And then to attach the other 2 pieces, I will just put a dot of glue on each end of the dowels and then cross those over. Once I get those in place, I'm going to be wrapping each end of the star where the dowels meet with some hemp rope, or you could use jute rope or jute cord or whatever you have on hand. And I'm just going to hot glue that down on the back side of the star and then wrap that around until I get to the end. And once I get to the end, I will just tuck that string cording down on top of itself and kind of squeeze it together. I'm going to do that for all 5 points of the star. And I'm also going to do that where all of the dowels meet each other, where they connect. Once I have all of those wrapped up and the glue has set, I took my hair dryer and went over the entire piece to get any loose glue strands that were just hanging off of there. This just kind of made them go away, so I would have a nice finished look to be able to paint it. I again used some Waverly chalk paint in the color white, and I painted the entire piece front and back, including the hemp cord. In order to be able to attach some florals in the middle of the star, I am using some white burlap ribbon, and I'm just going to glue that into the center portion of the star and just wrap that around and hot glue it to itself. And it will take 2 small strands of the burlap ribbon. Once I get that in place, I'm going to decorate it with some of these white fern bouquet from Dollar Tree, and I've already used a couple of the branches on there, or the leaves. I just cut the leaves off, and since I'd already used some of them, I only had 4 of the full-size leaves and then a couple of the smaller ones. So I put the full-size leaves on the top 3 parts of the star, and then at the bottom I used those smaller branches. And I just secured all of that in place with some hot glue. Once all of those are in place, I'm going to use some pieces from the Holly Bouquet from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to place the greenery on the outside parts of the star. And then I'll go in and add some red berries wherever I think they look nice. And then I'll also add some pine cones. Now the Holly Bouquet only came with 3 pine cones, so I did have to use an extra pine cone in my stash so that I would have 4 pine cones on there. And then I'll add a couple of more berries. And I think this project is so beautiful. I love the way the red and the green and then the brown and the pine cones just really pops off of this white star. 2 LED wooden lanterns at Dollar Tree. And I'm going to remove the hanger and the tag and try to get it as flush to the top as possible, but I wasn't too concerned because I'm going to cover that up anyway. I gave this 2 coats of my Waverly white chalk paint, and I painted the entire piece except for the inside part of the lantern. After those 2 coats are dry, I am going to be decorating this using some lamb's ear from Walmart, and I just cut the leaves off. And then I'm going to just hot glue some of these leaves to the top of the lanterns, and I'm also using some of those berries left over from the Holly Bouquet. And I just chose to place like 2 of the larger leaves opposite of each other and 2 of the smaller leaves opposite. But of course you can just decorate it however you like. Before I put the berries on there, I'm going to create a bow using this red ribbon with the white snowflakes and some floral wire. Both of these came from the Dollar Tree. And I just determined about how big I wanted my loops to be for my bow, and then I'm going to create 4 loops on each side. So it'll be 8 loops total, and then I'll squeeze that center part together really tightly and then secure that down with some floral wire, just by wrapping it around and making sure I keep it really tight and twisting it, and then fluffing my bow out. And then I'll cut the excess wire off and glue the bow right in the center of the leaves. And I'm going to do that for both of the lanterns. I found this ribbon at Walmart. They had 5 packs of different kinds of ribbon for $4.98. And I just wanted the Merry Christmas part off of this ribbon with the snowflake at the bottom. So I dovetailed the ends, and then I'm going to glue the top part of the ribbon in the center of the bow. and then drape it down off towards the side of the lantern. I am using some mini pine cones. These came in a large bag from Hobby Lobby when they were having their sale, but Dollar Tree does sell some mini pine cones as well. And I just added 4 to the top of this lantern. And I'm going to do that for the other lantern as well. Then I went back in with some of those red berries and just placed them wherever I thought that they would look nice. And once I get the second lantern done and put those berries in, this project is complete. And I just love how they turned out. They're so cute, and you can set one up on a candlestick so they'll have different heights, and I think they're just beautiful. Using this silver plastic charger plate. This came from Dollar Tree. And again, I am going to use my Waverly White chalk paint. I gave this 2 thin coats, allowing each coat to dry before I proceeded to the next step. I am using a stencil. This came in a package from Walmart. They have quite a few stencils in there, and I've already used this on a previous DIY on a tote bag. So I just placed that in the center of the plate, and I used some of my painter's tape to hold that in place. And I'm using some of Folk Art's Christmas Red and a small tiny sponge brush from Dollar Tree. I like to get the paint on my sponge brush and then wipe most of it off. And then I am using an up and down pouncing motion so that it doesn't bleed underneath the stencil. While the paint is wet, I'll go ahead and remove the stencil. Ooh, it just turned out so pretty. And then I'll let that paint dry. I'm also going to take the sponge brush. I wanted to bring up those raised beads around it with the same color as the stencil. And I know it looks very messy to begin with, but I'm going to go back and I'm going to clean that up. I'm just very light-handedly going over those rounded portions. And then once that paint had dried, I took my white Waverly chalk paint and went around the outside rim to clean that up. And then if any of the small circles were a little bit darker than the others, I just dry brushed some of the white paint over top of those areas until it blended in really nicely. Now that all the paint has dried, I'm going to decorate this with a lamb's ear pick from Walmart, and I just pulled the 2 branches apart and cut them down to the same size and attached that to the bottom of the plate with some hot glue. And I'm using some of Dollar General's frosted pine cones. They have hangers on the back. You can just simply pull that off. So I placed a pine cone in the center, and then again some more of those red berries off of the Dollar Tree pick, and I'm just going to glue that down on each side. Now, if you wanted to create a hanger, you could use some of this red and white cording to create the hanger for the back, but I am going to display mine on a plate stand. And I think this turned out so beautiful. I love how this project turned out. Dollar General, which was $1. After I remove the hanger and the tag, I am going to cut this bag in half. I did keep the front and the back of the bag because this is a very thin bag and I wanted to make it a little bit more sturdy. So I glued the 2 pieces together using a glue stick, and this made it just a little bit thicker, but you'll also have a nice dual sign that will look exactly the same on each side. Once I glue those together, I'm going to create a frame for the top and bottom of the sign using some quart paint stir sticks from Lowe's. You can get 30 of these for $1. And I cut the rounded tips off of the first one, and then the second one I will cut the rounded tip off and then hold that up to the gift bag to see how long I need to cut it. I did want to make sure I had a little bit of each side hanging over the gift bag, and I will go in and straighten those edges up on this gift bag. Once I cut those down, I cut 3 additional long pieces and 3 additional short pieces the same size as the first 2. So you'll have 4 of the shorter pieces and 4 of the longer pieces. And I took a piece of sandpaper and sanded each of the ends of these craft sticks to give it a nice smooth finish. I used some Apple Barrel Burnt Umber acrylic paint, and I mixed that with a little bit of water just to give it a staining effect, but a very thick staining effect. And I painted each one of the sticks on each side, as well as the ends and the sides of each of these pieces. Once that has dried, I do go in and straighten up the edges of the gift bag, and I am using my Cricut cutter to make sure I get a nice straight edge. Again, if you do not have a Cricut cutter or a paper cutter, you could always draw a line with a ruler and cut that down with your scissors. And once I cut the two sides and the bottom edge to make sure that they're all straight, I took a piece of hemp rope and determined how long I wanted the hanger to be at the top, and I will glue that down with some hot glue to hold that in place. Then I took the craft sticks and lined them up at the bottom of the frame, making sure I had the same amount of distance hanging off of each side, and then I will secure that down with some hot glue. Then I will repeat this process at the top of the sign, making sure that I cover up the hanger. So now when you do the back part of the sign, it will look exactly the same on the front and the back. And you'll do this again on the back of the sign, and you can actually put some hot glue on the end of the craft sticks to make sure it has a nice flush finish when you glue these craft sticks on top. And just line those up exactly where you had the back side of the craft sticks. Another very simple and easy DIY, but I love how it turned out. I love the way this dark wood and the red goes together and the white just pops off of there. I am using 2 of the wooden house signs and 1 snow globe sign from Dollar Tree. I went ahead and removed all of the decorative pieces. I used my hairdryer to try to loosen that glue up under those felt leaves. And I admit it was a bit of a struggle to get all of that off of there. I really had to use my fingernail to try to get all of that off. What I couldn't get off, I just used some sandpaper and sanded that down. I took some white Waverly chalk paint and gave each of the houses 1 coat of paint on the front and the sides. And then the snow globe, I did give that 2 coats of paint. I used some buffalo check fabric that I was so excited to find at Dollar Tree. And I am going to trace both of the houses out on the fabric and then cut those down to size. Once I have the 2 houses cut out, I will be using some burlap, which came from burlapfabric.com, to cover the snow globe. And that's why I gave that snow globe 2 coats of white paint, because you could somewhat see through that burlap. I just traced that and cut that down to size. And then to attach my fabric pieces to the wood pieces, I am using some Mod Podge. And I did not go over the buffalo check fabric with the Mod Podge, but I did go over the top of the burlap just to keep that from fraying and making sure that that stayed in place. Once all of the Mod Podge was dried, I went over each piece with my X-Acto knife to get all of the excess fabric off. I found these cute distressed lettering from Walmart for $1 a piece, and I just loved the colors on those. And I am just going to hot glue the J and the Y to the houses. And then I took one of Dollar Tree's garland ties and I wrapped that around my Mod Podge bottle to get a nice pretty circle. Once I got that circle, I just wrapped the garland around itself on the end. And then I used some of Dollar Tree's floral wire to wrap that around those end pieces that overlap, just to make sure it stayed in place. Once I cut the excess wire off, I hot glued the wreath to the snow globe, and then I took a piece of fabric and cut that down to glue around the bottom of the snow globe. And once I get that glued in place, I'll take another piece of the fabric, except I used a little bit more of the white to create a simple bow to go on the top of the wreath. And I just used some floral wire to squeeze that together and attach that right to the top with some hot glue, and then cut my tails down to the same length. And this DIY is finished. I just love how this one turned out. It is so pretty. I'm going to start off with this glass vase from Dollar Tree, and I've gone ahead and removed the sticker off the bottom. And I'm also going to be using this plastic snow globe from Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to remove the lid and the insert and the paperwork and set that to the side because I only need the outer portion of the snow globe. So to prep these for paint, I am using some rubbing alcohol and a cotton swab, and I'm going to clean the inside of both of these pieces with the alcohol because I'm going to be painting the inside. And I'm mostly doing this for the glass because you want to make sure it's nice and clean before you begin your paint. So once the alcohol is dried, I am taking my Waverly chalk paint in white, and I'm giving it a thin coat of paint on the inside, and I'm going to let that dry, and then I'll put a second coat of paint again on the inside. Now you could paint the outside of this if you'd like, but I chose to paint the inside because I thought that it would show less brush strokes, and I love the way it was nice and glossy on the outside and nice and smooth. So you're going to paint the inside of the snow globe as well. Again, this is with 2 coats, allowing those to dry in between the coats, and they're very thin coats. So once these have dried, I'm going to apply some Mod Podge to the inside of mine. This is completely optional, but I wanted to make sure that the paint doesn't chip, especially on the glass vase, because once I put these together, you wouldn't be able to fix the inside if that paint chipped off. So to secure these two together, I am using E6000 and hot glue, and the E6000 is going to create that permanent hold, and the hot glue is going to hold it in place just until that E6000 sets up. So I'm going to take the globe and flip it over so that the twisting portion is at the top, and then center that up. Make sure it's nice and centered on the bottom part, so this will become his head. So now I am going to take some of these pearl sparkling gems. These came from Dollar General, and if you've watched any of my previous videos, you've seen me use these a couple of times. And I'm going to paint 2 of those in my black chalkboard paint that came from Dollar General. Now this chalkboard sign came from Dollar Tree in a package, and I've already used the sign on a previous project, so I just clipped, because I keep everything, I kept the little wooden stake on the DIY I used before, and I just clipped the end of that off and gave it a nice coat of paint in the Folk Art Pure Orange, and this is going to become his nose. So now to cover up the rim at the top, I am going to use some buffalo check ribbon. This came from Hobby Lobby. Of course, you can use the buffalo check ribbon from Dollar Tree. I just had this on hand, and it's a little bit thinner than not as wide as what you get from Dollar Tree. And I'm just going to cut that down to length, and then I want to fold this over so that it is the same size as the twisting portion of the snow globe. And in this particular ribbon, it ends up being just the black and gray check part. So I'm going to fold that down so it's nice and straight, and then I'm going to use hot glue to hold it in place so it becomes one uniform piece. And then once all of that is glued down, I can attach it around the rim of the snow globe using hot glue. And this is actually going to become part of his hat. And you'll see in just a moment. I think it turns out really, really nice. So once I get all of that glued down, his hat, I'm actually going to be using a Dollar Tree ornament, and it is this buffalo check hat Dollar Tree ornament, and it is so beautiful. I love the greenery and the berries, and I'm going to cut the hanger off as close to the top of the hat as possible, and I kind of push that down, the little hanger part that's left over. And then I'm going to use hot glue to attach his hat to the top of his head. Now, as you can see, I've already applied one of his eyes. You guys, I'm sorry. He was rolling around all over the place, so I had to put a towel under him to keep him in place. But I'm just taking those sparkling gem pieces and attaching that with hot glue, and then attaching his nose with hot glue as well. And then once all of that is set up, I'm going to create his scarf using the same buffalo check ribbon. And I'm just going to apply hot glue where the two pieces meet. And then I'm going to put the ribbon on top of that and push it down and then fold it over just a little bit. And you'll see in just a minute, this gives it a little bit more of a realistic scarf look. And once I get that on there, just fold it down a little bit. You don't want it completely folded, but just to give it a little bit more of a realistic look. Go around with hot glue, and when I get to the front, I'm going to take one side, loop it under the other side, and once that comes through, pull that up, and then I'm going to loop it through the other side again. Boy, I hope that makes sense. That's a little confusing, but basically just almost like tying it. And then I'll fluff that out a little bit. I'm going to push it off to the side, and once I get that exactly the way I want it, I'm going to take hot glue and glue that piece right there to where the two pieces meet. Push that in, and then I will cut the end of the scarf off to the length I want and push those little pieces off to the side. So to create his mouth, I am using an oil-based Sharpie marker, and I wanted him to have a cute little quirky curvy mouth. You can create your mouth however you want. I just thought it gave him a nice cute touch. So the snowman portion is finished. To create his base, I am using this 8-inch wire wreath form from Dollar Tree. They come 2 in a pack. And I'm using the 15-foot garland from Dollar Tree. And I will use this entire 15-foot. So I'm just going to take the end and feed it through the center to begin with and wrap it around so that it will hold it in place. And then I'm going to take the entire 15 feet and just wrap it all the way around the outside, just kind of pushing it up, making sure it's nice and tight so that it will be a nice full wreath form when it's finished. So when I get to the end, I'm just going to wrap that end piece around and tuck it in under the bottom and then fluff it out, make sure everything's nice and tight and full. So to decorate it a little more, I am using some boxwood bundle from Walmart, and you can pick these up about 98 cents a bundle. And I'm just going to pull the pieces off of the bundle until I get however many I think I might want to use. And then I'm going to put hot glue in there and just add these into the wreath form. And I'm just adding them sporadically, making sure some of them hang off the sides, making sure some of them come up a little bit just to give it more of a natural look. And once I get all those boxwoods on, I'm also going to decorate it with some pine cones that I purchased from Dollar General, and they come 12 in a pack for $1, and they have hangers on them, so I'm going to take those hangers off, and you can just pull those straight off. And then I'm going to glue the pine cones down wherever I think they look nice, which kind of ends up going in between those boxwoods and around those. And then once I get my pine cones in place, I am going to take this outside and I am going to spray it with this Santa Snow, which I found at Dollar General for $1.75, and it honestly does not take much at all. This can should last so long because it doesn't take much to create that snowy effect. This is how it looks once it's dried. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. And to give it some color, I'm going to add these berries from this berry pick from Dollar Tree. And I just pulled the berries off and cut them down because they're larger than I really want. And when you pull them apart, you know, some of the pieces don't have paint on it, but you can take those pieces and kind of push it down into the wreath form so that you don't see those. And of course, you could put the berries on before you put the snow, but I really wanted that pop of red because I thought it looked really, really good. And once I get these berries on, the wreath form part of it, the base for the snowman, is finished. And then you can set your snowman right in the center. And I absolutely think this turned out so gorgeous. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments down below if you enjoyed this video and if you like this snowman centerpiece. I want to thank you so much for watching. Please take care, and I will see you next time.